That day, I stamped my signature on the divorce papers that my husband had prepared beforehand and thrown in my face. His expression could not have been more heartless. I clearly saw the glee and disdain in the eyes of Alexander Thorne, the man with whom I had shared my bed for the last 10 years. He surely thought he had finally succeeded in getting rid of an old, parasitic housewife, and he must have been brimming with excitement at the idea of bringing home, with all honors, his young, beautiful mistress, who was pregnant with his precious heir, dreaming of a promising new beginning. He was even kind enough to offer me a multi-million-dollar sum, several million dollars to, as he put it, demonstrate the generosity of a successful CEO and buy my silence. But he was wrong, completely wrong. The moment I stepped out the cold door of the courthouse, before his smug smile had faded, my first action was not to break down crying or call my family to complain. I calmly got into the waiting sedan, pulled out my secure phone, and dialed a number saved under the most ordinary name, IT Support. On the other end of the line, a polite and professional voice answered immediately. "Madam President, do you have instructions?" Looking at the crowd rushing past the window, I said in a serene but ice-cold voice, "Execute Plan B immediately. Freeze the entire $200 million and ensure no transactions are processed without my direct command." At that very moment, in the most luxurious real estate showroom downtown, Alexander Thorne had his arm wrapped around his mistress, Chloe Hayes, pointing at the model of a penthouse. He was about to pay the down payment for the most extravagant gift possible for his new wife and the precious child to come. He had no idea that just a few minutes later, his all-powerful black card would be ruthlessly declined, and that the entire empire he was so proud of, the immense fortune he thought he held in his hands, would vanish like smoke in an instant. It would collapse when the bank clerk informed him of the unbelievable truth, the truth that would send him plummeting from the peak of honor to the deepest abyss of humiliation. "My name is Sarah Miller. I am 35 years old. In the eyes of everyone, even my in-laws, I was an enviably lucky woman, fortunate to have married the young, talented, and handsome CEO of a major corporation, Alexander Thorne, becoming a modern Cinderella, lucky to live in a luxury mansion, free of financial worries, as a housewife who took care of her husband, went to the spa, and indulged in shopping. For 10 years, they believed in that perfect facade. They forgot who I was a decade ago, or perhaps they never wanted to know. Dear viewers, this was the beginning of a silent revenge, without gunshots or tears, where only numbers and cold law prevailed. How will Alex and his family react when they realize they have lost everything in just half a day? And what other surprising steps remain in my plan to completely dismantle his empire built on lies? If you want to know the answers, if you want to join me on this dramatic journey, don't forget to subscribe to the channel, like, and share this video. We will meet again in the second part of the story. See you soon. As the luxury sedan left the courthouse grounds, leaving behind the figure of an Alexander Thorne celebrating his victory, I did not look back. In my heart there was no regret, only a terrifying coldness. I observed my reflection in the car window. A woman in her mid-30s wearing a simple silk dress and light makeup, an unremarkable appearance. Who could imagine that such an ordinary-looking woman had just given an order capable of shaking the foundations of a corporate group valued at $200 million? To understand why I possess such immense power and why I was willing to live as a housewife for the last 10 years, I probably need to tell the story from the beginning. My story, the story of the invisible shadow, the intangible chief architect who stood behind my husband for the last decade. As I mentioned before, when I met Alex, he was a fresh college graduate, and his family's company was nothing more than a small, failing boutique design firm on the verge of bankruptcy. But at the time, I didn't see any of that. I saw in him the flame of ambition and the desire to revive his father's business. And with the love and innocence of youth, I decided I would be the one to give wings to that ambition. I left everything. I resigned from a promising career in San Francisco to follow him to New York. The first days were truly difficult. We lived in his family's modest townhouse. The company was drowning in debt, and almost all the employees had left. My father-in-law, Richard Thorne, was bedridden from the shock of the business failure, and my mother-in-law, Eleanor Thorne, spent her days sighing and blaming her incompetent son. Amidst this desperate situation, instead of frustration, I felt a strange excitement. For a financial expert like me, a company on the verge of bankruptcy was like a complex mathematical problem, a stimulating challenge. I did not act immediately. I knew that with my in-laws' patriarchal mindset, they would never accept a woman, much less a new daughter-in-law, meddling in the business. I decided to be an intelligent wife. I cooked every day and cared for my sick father-in-law. But every night, after everyone fell asleep, I sat with Alex at the desk. I asked him to bring me all the company's ledger books, all the contracts, all the debt documents. And in that dimly lit little room, I began my work as a corporate restructuring specialist. I spent sleepless nights analyzing every figure, finding gaps in management and unnecessary expenditure items. I drew up a detailed, step-by-step plan for Alex. First, reduce unnecessary staff and streamline the organization. Second, negotiate with creditors to extend payment deadlines and present a reasonable repayment roadmap. Third, and most importantly, find a new direction for the company. I realized we could never compete if we continued producing ordinary wooden furniture. I proposed a bold shift toward producing smart home technology and sustainable building solutions, a very novel field in the U.S. at the time. At first, Alex hesitated greatly. He was afraid of the risk, but I used all my knowledge and market analysis to convince him. I showed him the enormous potential of this market and painted a promising future. And to raise capital, I secretly injected a considerable part of my own personal endowment into the company in the form of an anonymous investor. Everything was done through complex transactions so no one would notice. Alex only knew that a benefactor had seen the company's potential and decided to invest. My plan succeeded beyond imagination. The new direction miraculously resurrected the company. Our smart home products caused a sensation in the market. Large contracts started pouring in. From being a failing workshop, my in-laws' company gradually recovered, started generating profits, and grew at a dizzying pace. Throughout this entire process, I was always in the shadows. Every major strategy and decision, from which projects to invest in, which companies to acquire, to when to issue shares, came from my hand. I drafted every plan and speech for Alex. His only role was to memorize them and appear before the public with the confident demeanor of a competent CEO. He was the face, I was the brain. He was the actor on stage, I was the director behind the curtain. I was satisfied with that role. I needed neither honor nor power. It was enough for me to see the man I loved succeed and my family happy. I naively thought he would understand and value my silent sacrifice. I did not realize that when a man tastes success too easily, he plunges into delusion. He would forget who provided it all and begin to think he deserved something better and newer than a housewife. For 10 years, living as a shadow, I helped him build an empire. But in those 10 years, without realizing it, I created a monster of delusion and betrayal. And in the end, that monster turned back to devour all my love and happiness. Perhaps you wonder how I came to possess such immense power. How could I freeze the assets of an entire group with a single phone call? Was it simply because I developed strategies and advised from the shadows? No, dear viewers. If that were the case, Alex could have easily pulled me out of the game as soon as he changed his mind. My true power stems from a secret, from an immense promise made almost 10 years ago. A promise made with the only person in my in-laws' family who saw my true worth. That person was my father-in-law, Richard Thorne. When I married and entered the family, Mr. Thorne was going through the most frustrating moment of his life. The business to which he had dedicated his entire existence faced bankruptcy, causing him illness. While caring for him in the hospital, I not only fulfilled my duty as a daughter-in-law, but I regarded him as my own father. We spent many hours conversing and opening our hearts. He was an intelligent and perceptive man, seasoned by 1,000 battles. Even bedridden, he never stopped worrying about the company's future. And it was in those conversations that he quickly realized something. This woman, whom his wife had always belittled, possessed an extraordinary mind for management and finance. He was amazed when I accurately pinpointed the flaws in his past management strategies and proposed new ideas, audacious yet logical. At the same time, he became aware of another painful truth. His only son, Alexander, though he had a clean appearance and ambition, lacked the determination, sharpness, and coldness necessary in a leader. He knew that if he left the entire business to Alex, it would soon collapse again. He agonized, thought deeply, and one afternoon, when we were alone in the hospital room, he made what was probably the most important decision of his life. "Daughter," he called me. His voice was weak, but his gaze was extremely lucid. "I have a favor to ask of you, a very important one, and I want to entrust it to you. Can you promise me that no matter what happens, you will never abandon Alex or this family's business?" At that moment, filled with a burning love for Alex, I nodded without hesitation. "Yes, Father, I promise you." "Good," he sighed with relief. "Then listen to me closely. I know I don't have much time left, but I cannot close my eyes while my life's work is about to vanish like smoke. I know my son Alex's character. He is a good boy, but he is not leadership material. He trusts people too much and is driven by emotions. But you," he looked directly into my eyes, "you have the brain of a shark. You are cold, decisive, and you see right through people. You are the one who can steer this ship." And then he revealed a monumental plan. He had his personal lawyer secretly draft a will more accurately, a fiduciary investment trust contract delegating the management and ownership of all his assets. According to that contract, upon his death, all his shares, representing 80% of the company's capital, would not be inherited by Alex or his mother, but would be transferred to an offshore fiduciary investment foundation. And the sole person designated to manage that foundation and exercise all rights was me, Sarah Miller. "I do this," he explained, "not because I don't trust my son, but because I love him too much. I don't want him to carry such a heavy burden. You will be the shadow brain, the one who makes life and death decisions, and Alex will be the visible face, the representative. He will continue to enjoy all the glory and wealth as CEO, with a generous salary and bonuses. But the real power must be in your hands. Only then can this company survive and prosper." That promise also included very strict clauses for me. I had the responsibility to continue growing the company. I could not sell it or weaken it. I was also responsible for caring for the lives of Alex and his mother, guaranteeing them a comfortable life. And most importantly, this secret was to be kept until I felt the need to reveal it. It was a heavy burden, but at the same time, it was the absolute trust my father-in-law placed in me. The day my father-in-law passed away, I promised before his portrait that I would do what he had entrusted to me, and for the last 10 years, I did just that. I silently ran the company, turning a near-bankrupt design firm into a $200 million empire. I gave Alex a brilliant career and my mother-in-law a queen's life. I fulfilled my responsibility. But perhaps my father-in-law, despite his intelligence, did not predict one thing, that when a man gains power and honor too easily, it breeds delusion and betrayal, and that when his most trusted daughter-in-law is cornered, she will no longer remain a silent shadow. She will use the very power he conferred upon her to claim justice for herself. My late father-in-law's secret trust was not mere delegation, it was a sword, and now the time had come to draw it. With the secret will and the absolute power my late father-in-law entrusted to me, I dedicated myself to rebuilding and building the Thorne family's business empire, but I did it in an extremely subtle and silent way, like a puppeteer who, behind a thick velvet curtain, skillfully manipulates every string to create a perfect play. No one, not even my husband, Alexander Thorne, who was beside me, nor my mother-in-law Eleanor, who lived in the same house, realized my true role. They only saw the miraculous results and dazzling success, but they completely ignored that the person creating all those miracles was precisely the housewife, daughter-in-law, whom they had always belittled. My office was not a glamorous suite with a shiny plaque in a skyscraper. It was a small room in the mansion's attic that I had cleverly camouflaged as a reading and relaxation space. Inside, besides oak shelves filled with classic literature, there was a state-of-the-art supercomputer system, multiple monitors displaying complex stock market indices, and a separate high-speed satellite internet line installed to ensure a fluid 24/7 connection. That was my command center, my supreme headquarters. From there, I monitored every minimal fluctuation in global financial markets. From there, with a single click, I gave orders to buy and sell stocks and bonds worth tens of millions of dollars. And also from there, I mapped out every movement and development strategy for Alex and the group. My manipulation was carried out systematically and almost without leaving a trace. Every morning, after preparing an elaborate breakfast for the whole family, I spent about an hour with my husband in his ground floor study, having tea and reading the newspaper together. But in reality, that was the most important strategy meeting of the day. I would casually pretend to read a hot news item in an international economic paper about a new investment trend or an unusual competitor move, and in the role of an ignorant wife, I would innocently ask Alex for his opinion. "Honey, they talk a lot about using AI in the real estate sector. It sounds so complicated. Since you're the expert, what do you think about this? Shouldn't we look into this field a bit for our company? Or, they say that group stock has fallen to historical lows. Since you're a management genius, do you think it would be a good time to buy? Or would it be too risky?" Alex, always eager to show off and with nearly zero economic knowledge, would always dismiss it arrogantly. "Oh, what do you know about business? Don't stress yourself reading those silly news items. I'll handle the company affairs." But barely a day or two later, in a high-level group meeting, he would solemnly present those very ideas as if they were his own vision and strategic decision. "I have spent several nights studying this thoroughly," he would tell the executives in a firm voice. "I believe that investing in AI is the future. It is the path to survival for our group." The junior executives, who were the best financial experts I myself had hired and infiltrated, would immediately applaud, praising the wisdom, genius, and foresight of the young CEO. Every important speech Alex gave before the shareholders' meeting, every television or press interview, was drafted by me. I meticulously studied his way of speaking, his vocabulary, even his habits of stuttering, to write speeches that sounded grandiose and profound, but seemed to come from his own mind and mouth. His only role was to memorize them like a parrot and act confidently and charismatically in front of the cameras. Slowly, perhaps from acting so much, he too began to believe that those ideas and words were truly his. He completely immersed himself in the delusion of his own talent and greatness, unaware that he was simply a puppet skillfully handled by his wife, a mere housewife. Meanwhile, my mother-in-law, Eleanor, was the perfect catalyst and the most fervent fan of her son's delusion. She knew nothing of management or finance. She only saw the superficial results. The company grew daily, money flowed like water, and her son became increasingly famous and praised by society. She went everywhere, from neighborhood association meetings to lavish high society tea parties, boasting about the management genius her son was, whom she had borne with so much effort. "My Alex is incredible, ladies," she used to say, fanning herself with a silk fan with an air of pride. "That boy has a genius brain." In just a few years, he turned the bankrupt design firm his father left him into a huge group. Truly, the apple doesn't fall far from the tree. It's a blessing to the family. I couldn't ask for more. I just hope he gives me a grandson soon to continue the lineage. And every time someone discreetly asked about my role, the daughter-in-law's, in that success, she would twist her lips in contempt and wave her hand. "Please, what would my daughter-in-law know? She was just lucky to run into our Alex. She spends the day at home doing nothing, living off us, being a housewife. What use is she to the world? Well, at least she's docile and obedient, so I suppose she fulfills her role as a daughter-in-law." Those words reached my ears many times through the housekeepers, but I kept silent. I thought that since they didn't know the truth, it wasn't worth arguing as long as the family was at peace, and Alex still loved and respected me. But I was wrong. My silence, my withdrawal did not bring the peace I desired. It made them despise me even more, made them believe I was a useless parasite, a mere decoration in the house. And that created the conditions for another tragedy to germinate, one that was inevitable. When a man obtains everything too easily and deceives himself into thinking he has achieved it all on his own, he will begin to feel that his housewife wife is no longer worthy of his greatness. He will seek recognition outside in newer, younger, and more beautiful women, and betrayal approaches as an inevitable consequence. When a man reaches the pinnacle of honor without shedding a drop of sweat, when he is surrounded by false praise and adulation, he easily forgets who he is and who climbed the first step with him. And my husband, Alexander Thorne, was the perfect proof of that cruel law. When the $200 million empire was firmly consolidated under my invisible hand, when his CEO position became unshakable, he began to feel that the shell of a faithful husband and family man was too suffocating and boring. He started craving new adventures and conquests to prove what he confused with virility, and she appeared as an inevitable choice, one that perfectly matched his needs at that moment. Chloe Hayes, a young model who had just entered the entertainment world with a glamorous body and a beautiful but calculating innocent face. She was hired by the group's marketing department as the face of a luxury real estate project in Miami. And during their work together, her explicit and intentional admiration and adoration at social parties quickly caught Alex's attention. For a man like Alex, intoxicated by the illusion of his own talent, the admiration of a young, beautiful, and famous woman was an irresistible stimulant and drug. Next to me, his wife, who knew his true nature too well, who saw through all his weaknesses and incompetence, he could never feel like a king or a saint. I could love him, care for him, advise him, but I couldn't look at him through the eyes of a fanatic worshiper. I knew he was just a puppet, but Chloe was different. She saw him as a god, a true management genius. At every party, she lavished praise on his intelligence, determination, and great vision. She gave him exactly what he lacked, what I could never give him: blind, false recognition. And they threw themselves into the fire like moths, one for vanity, the other for material greed. At first, their illicit relationship was limited to secret dates after work, sweet messages hastily deleted before arriving home. But as they delved deeper into that wrong relationship, and perhaps due to Chloe's pressure, Alex started becoming much bolder and more reckless. He no longer tried to meticulously hide. Sudden business trips became more frequent, as did late-night arrivals home, smelling of alcohol and a strange perfume. I knew everything. I felt everything. A woman's intuition and a financial analyst's sharpness clearly showed me his abnormal changes. I could have found proof in an instant if I had wanted to. One call to the group's cybersecurity team, and I would have all his call records, messages, and even his location in my hands. But I didn't. Why not? Because my love for him had cooled a long time ago. Since the day he came home, threw a business plan full of errors at me, and demanded I correct it properly by the next morning. My silence was not out of fear or weakness, but because my pride was too strong. I, Sarah Miller, would never stoop to jealousy. I would never turn my marriage into cheap drama for the world's scrutiny. I chose to observe in silence, like a shark swimming calmly beside a sinking ship, waiting for the most opportune moment to strike. I naively hoped he would stop on his own, realize who was truly important, and return. In my way, I tried to retain him by showing him my value, by growing the group even more. But all my efforts were in vain. In his eyes, my silence was not tolerance, but the weakness and helplessness of a parasitic woman. That convinced him even more that I could never leave him, that I couldn't give up this luxurious life. He thought, how could a housewife who hasn't set foot in society for 10 years survive without his support? That delusion, coupled with Chloe's growing belly, pushed him to the final, cruelest, and most heartless decision. He decided to abandon me to be with his mistress openly and legally. He chose to deliver the final blow on the 7th anniversary of our marriage, the day he thought I would be weakest and most vulnerable. He brought her home, openly exhibiting his betrayal, and threw the divorce papers in my face, along with the most hurtful and insulting words. The puppet I had created with my youth was now trying to bring down and destroy its own creator. He didn't know that by doing so, he was pressing the switch on a ticking time bomb, a bomb that would explode his empire, his future, and the illusion of his own greatness. When Alexander Thorne, the husband I had supported with my youth, brought his pregnant mistress home to publicly demand a divorce, I thought it was the height of cruelty, the final stab into my heart, already full of wounds. But I was wrong. It was the reaction of my mother-in-law, Eleanor, whom I had served for over 10 years and provided a queen's life, that plunged me into the abyss of despair and ignited in me the fire of hatred and the determination to make them pay. Initially, just after Alex announced the divorce, I saw a moment of surprise and confusion on Eleanor's face, but that surprise vanished in an instant. She glanced fleetingly at her son and then looked down at Chloe's slightly bulging belly. And like someone who has solved a difficult mathematical problem, an irrepressible clarity and joy shone in her eyes. She did not rebuke her son for his infidelity, nor did she show the slightest compassion for her daughter-in-law, with whom she had shared joys and sorrows. She simply observed and evaluated the situation in silence, like an old fox. And when the mistress, Chloe, made a significant and provocative gesture by resting her hand on her belly, Eleanor instantly understood the situation. A radiant smile, a selfish and cruel joy, blossomed on her face. "Oh my God, really? How wonderful! My son, you're finally thinking of the family," she exclaimed, clapping her hands. Her voice sounded happier than when her son's company won a multi-million-dollar contract. She ran not to comfort or support her daughter-in-law, who stood there stunned, but to approach Chloe. She took her hand and looked at her belly with infinite joy. "My grandchild, the firstborn of our Thorne family, is here. Daughter, with such good news, why didn't you say so earlier? I would have prepared restorative broths for you. Come, sit down and rest. Moving too much is not good for our precious grandchild." She made Chloe sit down with utmost care on the Italian designer sofa, which I myself had paid for, as if she were attending to an empress dowager. She lavished attention on her, personally serving her water, adjusting a cushion, and asking questions in a voice so sweet it sent shivers down my spine. "How many months are you? Is it a boy or a girl? Are you having morning sickness? Are you craving anything? I'll have it prepared right away. From now on, stay here. You don't have to go anywhere. The servants here will take good care of you and the baby." I watched in stunned silence, her moving play as a future mother-in-law and daughter-in-law. Although I, the legal wife and true owner of this house, was standing right there, in their eyes, I had become invisible. No, worse than invisible. I had become an obstacle, a nuisance, an old object that needed to be removed as soon as possible to make way for the new. And she didn't make me wait long. After showing enough attention and care to her new daughter-in-law and her precious grandchild, she turned toward me. This time, there was no trace of pretense left on her face, only coldness, arrogance, and irrepressible joy. "Sarah," she began, how strange and cold my name sounded on her lips. "At this point, you should know your place. As you see, our Alex has found new happiness, and Chloe carries the Thorne family blood in her womb. If you stay here, you will only be a nuisance and bring trouble to the house." She paused and scanned me from head to toe with a look of contempt. "Frankly speaking, during these 10 years, you have lived like a queen in this house thanks to our Alex, but your bad luck determined that you were not destined to enjoy that fortune. Who told you to be a barren tree? A woman who cannot bear children? Well, I suppose it's fate. We can't blame you. Now, you should leave on your own so they can live their life with dignity. You are still young. You can find other happiness. In this Thorne family, in this house of renown, there is no place for a daughter-in-law who cannot give us an heir, who cannot give us children." Those two phrases she had repeated countless times behind my back in her conversations with friends and relatives, but this was the first time she had said it to my face in such a ruthless and insulting way. "Mom, why are you saying that to Sarah?" Alex finally intervened, but not to defend me, but simply to fulfill his role as a compassionate man and save appearances. "After all, she's been by my side for 10 years. I won't let her lose out." "You shut up," Eleanor shouted, interrupting her son. "You are indecisive and soft. I am taking care of this matter, so you men stay out of it, and let us women handle it." She stood up and approached me with a threatening expression. She no longer looked like a retired socialite, but rather a madam throwing out an old prostitute. She pointed her finger at the huge wooden entrance door. "Grab your personal things and get out of this house right now. I give you 15 minutes. From this moment on, you are no longer my daughter-in-law or part of this family. Don't force me to call the security guards. It would be much more embarrassing." She was kicking me out, She was kicking me out of my own home, the house that the money I earned had paid for. Her audacity and shamelessness had reached an incredible level. I looked at her, and then at Alex. He stood with his head bowed, not refuting a single word from his mother, tacitly agreeing. I understood. This was not a spontaneous outburst from Eleanor. It was a play that mother and son had discussed and planned beforehand. They wanted to humiliate me this way, to kick me out of the house in the most shameful way to justify welcoming the mistress. They wanted to turn me into the culprit, the one repudiated by the in-laws, to easily seize this house and all the fortune they believed belonged to Alex. The rage rising in my throat almost suffocated me, but I didn't scream, I didn't argue, I didn't cry, because I knew that at that moment, any word was useless. There is no reasoning with people blinded by greed and betrayal. I looked at them one last time. I looked at them for a long time to deeply engrave in my memory the true faces of these ungrateful people, and I turned around. Yes, I would leave, but I would not leave empty-handed and humiliated. As I left, I would take everything that belonged to me, and I would also make them pay the highest, unimaginable price for this charade of expulsion today. After successfully kicking out the nuisance I represented, Alexander Thorne and his mother completely indulged in joy and elation. That same night, they hosted a small party to celebrate the end of bad luck and welcome the new family member. Eleanor went through the house praising her son's decision and her future daughter-in-law's likability to no end. Alex, although he felt a little guilty at first, soon forgot everything with Chloe's sweet affections. He was completely convinced that he had made the correct decision in his life. He thought he had shed a boring past to move toward a brighter future. The next morning, to show his CEO status and win the heart of his pregnant mistress, Alex decided to buy Chloe a new luxury condo, just as he had promised. He said the current one, though luxurious, was permeated with the vestiges of the past and was not suitable for the new lady of the house. He wanted a completely new place, a completely new beginning. He drove his luxurious Porsche with Chloe by his side, dressed in designer maternity wear, toward the most expensive waterfront development in Manhattan, a place where multi-million-dollar penthouses and condos were concentrated only for the super-rich. Alex had set his sights on a duplex penthouse of about 5,000 square feet, with a private pool and panoramic views of the city's heart. The price, of course, was astronomical, $5 million for the down payment alone. Entering the showroom with the air of a successful businessman and a confident attitude, Alex was immediately surrounded by salespeople who treated him like a king. He put his arm around Chloe's shoulders, walked around, and pointed his hand at the most expensive penthouse model. "We'll take this one," he said nonchalantly, as if he were buying groceries at the market. All the salespeople were impressed. Chloe was so happy she blushed. She leaned on Alex's body with eyes full of pride and adoration. "Yes, Mr. Thorne, an excellent choice. To complete the transaction, you must first pay a deposit of 10% of the apartment price, which is $5 million. Will you pay by card or bank transfer?" "By card," Alex replied curtly. He pulled out a powerful, limitless black card for super VIP clients from his crocodile skin wallet. He handed it to the employee with an air of pride. This was the moment he had anticipated the most, the moment to boast of his wealth and power before a beauty. The employee took the card respectfully and inserted it into the terminal. He typed $5 million and then passed the terminal to Alex to enter his PIN. Alex casually pressed the usual numbers. Both he and Chloe held their breath, expecting the beep and the receipt printing. But instead of the familiar success notification, a red text appeared on the terminal screen: "Transaction declined. Contact your bank." The smile froze on Alex's face. "What's wrong? Your machine seems to have a problem." "Try again," he said with a slightly irritated tone. The employee was also a bit confused. He restarted the machine and swiped the card again, but the result was the same: transaction declined. At this point, not only Alex but also Chloe began to feel that something was wrong. The expression of the surrounding employees also began to change from admiration to slight suspicion. "Impossible!" Alex shouted, starting to lose his composure. "This card never gives me problems. Call your manager." The manager quickly arrived and, after hearing the situation, politely suggested trying another way. Perhaps you could try making a direct transfer through your bank's app? Alex, indignant, pulled out his phone. He logged into the bank app, where he usually saw figures of hundreds of millions of dollars dancing. But today, when the screen appeared, he felt as if an electric shock ran through his entire body. All the figures had vanished. In his personal accounts, in the company accounts, in the associated investment accounts, the balance of all of them showed a single number, 0. "What the hell is this?" Alex stammered as a cold sweat beaded on his forehead. He logged out and logged back in, but the result did not change. Beneath each account was a small red notice. "Your account has been temporarily frozen at the request of the ultimate beneficial owner. All transactions have been invalidated." Ultimate beneficial owner. Who the hell was that? Wasn't he the CEO and top executive of the group? "Alex, what's wrong?" Chloe asked worriedly, seeing her beloved's expression. "Shut up!" Alex yelled, unable to maintain his composure any longer. He got up quickly, went to a corner, and started making calls. The first was to the group's chief financial officer, Mr. Alvarez. "Mr. Alvarez, what's wrong with the company accounts? Why are they all frozen?" The CFO's voice on the other end of the line sounded tired and surprised. "Mr. Thorne, I just received the notification. The freezing order came directly from the Swiss bank where our main investment fund is managed. They say it is a direct order from the fund president, that is, the ultimate beneficial owner." "President? What president? My father died, and I'm the executive," Alex shouted into the phone. I don't know either, sir. They only said the person who gave the order is named Sarah Miller." Sarah Miller. That name was like a lightning bolt hitting Alex's brain. He was stunned, almost dropping the phone. Impossible. How could it be her? How could a housewife, a parasite, have such immense power? There had to be a mistake. The shock at the bank was only the beginning of the nightmare, of the terrible truth he was about to face. After the first blow at the real estate office, Alexander Thorne ran out of there like a lost soul, leaving behind a bewildered Chloe and the contemptuous glances of the salespeople. He collapsed into his Porsche, feeling like the entire world was spinning around him. Sarah Miller. How could it be Sarah Miller? There had to be a terrible mistake. Had she conspired with the CFO to play a cruel joke on him? He rushed to dial another number, this time the group's chief accountant, Mr. Garcia, whom he trusted blindly. "Mr. Garcia, check it right now. Is there any problem with the entire financial system of the group? Why have all the accounts been frozen?" The chief accountant's voice on the other end of the line was also full of panic and fear. "Mr. Thorne, I don't understand anything either. This morning, I received an email from the highest administration system informing of a restructuring of all financial operational authority. All access permissions for you and the other executives have been revoked. The order was given by someone with the title of President of the High Council, a title I've never heard before." "President of the High Council? Who is it? What is her name?" Alex shouted, his heart pounding at 1,000 beats per minute. Yes. The email specifies that the person holding that position is Miss Sarah Miller." Sarah Miller again. This time there was no doubt. That name, alongside such a powerful position, confirmed an undeniable fact. The housewife he had just abandoned somehow had absolute control over the financial life of the entire group. But how? How could a woman who only dedicated herself to household chores have such terrifying power? Alex frantically called one executive after another, but they all gave him similar answers. They were mere employees, they obeyed orders from above, and now their supreme boss was not CEO Alexander Thorne, but President Sarah Miller. Overwhelmed by helplessness, panic, and anger, Alex drove home like a madman. He needed an explanation. He needed to uncover the truth. Upon arriving at the condo, he saw his mother Eleanor cheerfully giving orders to the maid to redecorate my former room for the new daughter-in-law. "Mom, we have a big problem," Alex burst in, his face pale. He told her everything, the card rejection, the account freeze, and Sarah's sudden rise to the presidency. Hearing the story, Eleanor was stunned at first, incredulous, but that expression of astonishment soon turned into fury. "What? That wicked harlot dares to do something like that? She shouted in a sharp voice. By what right? She's nothing more than a parasite, a woman who can't even have children. She must have played some dirty trick. She's conspired with those executives to steal the company from my son. Greed and ignorance prevented her from accepting the truth. In her eyes, I was still the small-town daughter-in-law, nothing more. She couldn't believe I could be the person with the real power. No, we can't let her get away with this, she said, pacing the room. She's surely doing this to take revenge on us, to pressure us into getting more money in the settlement. We have to go find her and put her in her place. Even if we're divorced, she's still the daughter-in-law of this house, and she needs to learn that she can't overstep her boundaries. The rage and the illusion of her power as a mother-in-law blinded her. She still thought she could dominate me and lecture me with her mother-in-law authority. Come on, take me right now to where she is, she ordered her son. I heard she's temporarily staying at a friend's penthouse in that crown tower. No, let's go there. I have to demand explanations in person. I'm going to teach her a lesson. Alex was also immersed in panic and anger at that moment. He no longer had the rationale to weigh the pros and cons. He too wanted to find me, confront me, and discover the truth. He also believed that this was nothing more than a dirty trick of mine and thought he could easily suppress it with his strength as a man. Thus, one furious and one panicking, mother and son drove off to look for me with the blind conviction that they still held the upper hand. They didn't know they were walking directly into a larger trap, into a play that my late father-in-law and I had prepared 10 years earlier. In a state of extreme fury and confusion, mother and son sped the Porsche toward the Crown Tower, where they believed I was temporarily staying. Eleanor, sitting in the passenger seat with a murderous expression, wouldn't stop hurling vicious insults, calling me a viper and ungrateful. She had even drawn up a plan in her head. Upon arriving, she would cause a scene, cry, yell, and make a fuss so everyone there would know about my disloyalty and betrayal, hoping that shame would force me to docilely return everything. Alex silently just gripped the steering wheel. He also imagined the scene where he would interrogate me and, with his authority as a husband, force me to confess my conspiracy. They were still steeped in their illusion of power, unaware that the world had completely changed. Their luxury sedan stopped in front of the lobby of Tower 1, the most lavish in the complex. They got out of the car with the confident demeanor typical of the upper class, but that confidence vanished instantly, as if a bucket of cold water had been thrown on them. Just as they tried to enter the lobby, 2 tall, uniformed security guards immediately came out and blocked their path with their hands. "Excuse me, what is your purpose here?" one asked in a polite but firm voice. Eleanor frowned in disgust. "Move aside. We're here to see a relative on the 35th floor. I'm sorry, but who are you looking for on the 35th floor, and do you have an appointment?" the second guard asked, maintaining his blocking posture. "Do we have to inform you who we are looking for?" Eleanor shouted. "We're here to see our daughter-in-law, Mrs. Sarah Miller. We are family. What need is there for an appointment?" Hearing the name Sarah Miller and the apartment number, the 2 guards exchanged glances, and the first one said in an even firmer voice, "We apologize, but we have received instructions from the apartment owner not to receive any guests, not on the pre-approved appointment list, and your names are not on that list. Please retreat." "What? She dares to do such a thing?" Eleanor became enraged. "She thinks she can give orders to the guards here, living on borrowed time at a friend's house? Do you know who I am? I am her mother-in-law. Move aside right now." Alex, fearing his mother's scandal would make him lose composure, quickly pulled her aside. Trying to be more polite, he pulled out a business card from his wallet. "Hello. I am Alexander Thorne, CEO of the Thorne Group. I have a small misunderstanding with my wife. I would appreciate it if you would allow us up for a moment to resolve a family matter." He thought his CEO title would intimidate these guards, but he was wrong. The guard looked at the card, handed it back, and shook his head. "I'm sorry, Mr. Thorne. We only follow the rules and the owner's instructions. Whoever you are, we cannot let you go up. If you continue to cause a disturbance, we will be forced to take more drastic measures." The inflexible and relentless attitude of the security team left Alex and his mother speechless. They were used to being respected and pampered wherever they went. It was the first time they had been so ruthlessly denied entry. They realized something was terribly wrong. This penthouse was not simply a friend's house, as they had thought. While they stood there, bewildered, furious, and unsure what to do, a very elegant man in a black suit emerged from the lobby. It was the lawyer, Matthew Hayes. He had contacted me previously and had been waiting there for a while. "Hello, Mr. Thorne." "And Mrs. Thorne," Attorney Hayes began. His voice was calm, but with a barely concealed hint of sarcasm. "You've come looking for Miss Sarah. Unfortunately, she is not here." You're that harlot Sarah's lawyer, aren't you?" Eleanor recognized the lawyer who had been at their house before to handle some of my paperwork. "Tell me, where is that harlot hiding? Are you also conspiring with her to steal our family fortune?" Attorney Hayes merely smiled. "Madam, you should be more careful with your words. Defamation is also a serious crime. I am not conspiring with anyone. I am simply doing my job under the engagement of my client and the true owner of this penthouse, Miss Sarah." "The owner?" Alex and Eleanor shouted in unison, unable to believe what they were hearing. "This penthouse belonged to her?" "Exactly," Attorney Hayes nodded. "She bought it 3 years ago with her own personal funds. She simply didn't tell anyone because she doesn't like to show off." "Oh, and it's not just this house," Attorney Hayes continued, as if he were chatting. "I believe she also has a few more in San Francisco and Miami. I don't recall exactly." The lawyer's words were like successive hammer blows to the mother and son's heads. They were completely in shock. The daughter-in-law, the wife they had always scorned as a parasite, had silently amassed an enormous personal fortune without their knowledge. But what about the company? Why does she have the right to freeze the company accounts?" Alex stammered. This was what terrified him the most. "Ah, that," Attorney Hayes smiled enigmatically. "Regarding that matter, you shouldn't ask me, but rather someone else. Someone you probably forgot about a long time ago." Just then, another man stepped out from behind the lawyer, a humble-looking man in worn clothes and a baseball cap in his hand. It was the old driver, Mr. Johnson, who had served my father-in-law for decades. Seeing him, Alex and Eleanor became even more confused. "Mr. Johnson, what are you doing here?" Mr. Johnson didn't answer. He just bowed his head and said in a trembling voice, "Young master, madam, the late president entrusted me with one thing. He told me that if a day like today came, I should hand this over to you." As he finished speaking, Mr. Johnson took an envelope yellowed by time from his pocket and respectfully handed it to Alex with trembling hands. The failed visit had opened the door to an even greater secret, to a truth that was about to be revealed from eternity. The envelope, yellowed and worn by time, lay in Alexander Thorne's hands, but he felt it as hot and heavy as a rock. He murmured to himself, unable to comprehend what was happening. His father had passed away nearly 10 years ago, and all matters related to the will and inheritance had been closed long ago. Why was such a mysterious envelope suddenly appearing? Eleanor was also visibly bewildered. She stared intently at the envelope, then at the old driver, and a nameless unease began to grow in her heart. "What's inside, Mr. Johnson?" Alex asked in a slightly trembling voice. Mr. Johnson simply shook his head. His old, wrinkled eyes filled with tears. "I don't really know, young master. The president only told me to guard it well and only bring it out the day you did great harm to Miss Sarah." The old driver's words were like a dagger stabbing Alex's conscience. His face paled, and with trembling hands, he slowly broke the old seal on the envelope. Inside was not a letter, but a sheaf of meticulously typed documents and a small USB drive. Alex took out the documents and began to read. As he read, his face changed from pale to a purplish hue. His hands trembled so much that he could barely hold the papers. Eleanor, seeing him, became impatient and snatched the documents to read them, and she too was instantly petrified. It was a copy of the Asset Fiduciary Trust contract that my father-in-law, Richard Thorne, had drafted a month before he passed away. The contract had been prepared by a prestigious international law firm. It bore the signatures of Mr. Thorne, mine, and 2 witnesses, and it was perfectly notarized and legalized. The content of that contract more accurately, that veiled will revealed a devastating truth, an absolutely unbelievable truth. According to its terms, upon Mr. Were courting Isn't a sin, Mr. Thorne's death, his entire shareholding in the company, representing 80% of the total value, would not be inherited by his wife, Eleanor, or his son, Alexander Thorne, but would be transferred in its entirety to a fiduciary investment foundation based in Switzerland. And the only person designated to manage that foundation, to receive the profits, and to exercise full power over all activities, investments, sales, and fund withdrawals, was me, Sarah Miller. The contract also very clearly specified Alexander Thorne's role. He would be appointed to the position of CEO, acting as the representative image of the company, and would enjoy a very generous salary, bonuses, and benefits commensurate with his position as CEO of a large corporation. However, he would have no ownership or decision-making power over key financial matters. All important decisions had to be approved by the fund manager, that is, by me. Plainly put, he was nothing more than a highly paid employee working for his own family's company. Alex and his mother were completely stunned, speechless. They reread the contract again and again, as if they couldn't believe their eyes. Why? Why had Mr. Thorne done that? Why did he trust a newly arrived daughter-in-law more than his own son and wife? Just then, attorney Matthew Hayes, who had remained silent observing, spoke up. His voice was cold and clear. Perhaps if you see this, you will better understand Mr. Thorne's reasons. He took the USB from Alex's hand, connected it to a tablet he carried with him, and turned the screen toward them. A video appeared on the screen. It was a recording from Mr. Thorne's last days filmed in his hospital room. He was sitting in bed, and although he looked emaciated and weak, his gaze was extremely lucid and penetrating. He was speaking, and the person sitting opposite him, listening intently, was me. Mr. Thorne's voice resonated weak but firm. I know I don't have much time left. I've dedicated my whole life to building this business, and I cannot allow it to sink like this. I know Alex's character well. He's a good boy, but he's not leadership material. He's too impulsive. He trusts people too easily. Leaving this entire group to him is like leaving the sheep in the care of the wolf. And my wife is a good woman, but she loves her son with a blind devotion and knows nothing of business. I've tossed and turned many nights. He paused and coughed sharply. Then he looked at me, and his eyes were filled with deep trust. Until you appeared, Sarah. With just a few conversations, I knew you had an extraordinary mind. You possess the sharpness, determination, and coldness necessary for a great entrepreneur. You are the one who can steer this ship safely and beyond. I know it's unfair to burden you with such a heavy weight, but I have no other choice. Consider it a father's plea. Sarah, please take care of this business for me and take care of Alex for me. I trust you. The video ended, but Mr. Thorne's last words continued to echo in the space. The truth had been revealed so clearly that it could no longer be denied. There was no conspiracy, no usurpation. Everything had been planned and delegated by the head of the family himself, the founder of the group. Alex and Eleanor collapsed onto the waiting room seats in the lobby, completely devastated. All their anger and accusations had become so stupid and ridiculous. They had been insulting and trying to harm the very benefactress who had silently sustained this family for the past 10 years. They themselves had shattered the perfect play Mr. Thorne had created to protect their comfortable lives. I suppose you understand everything now, don't you? Attorney Hayes said as he put away the tablet. Miss Sarah has taken nothing from anyone. On the contrary, she has faithfully fulfilled Mr. Prosson, Thorne's last will, working tirelessly to turn a company on the verge of bankruptcy into a $200 million empire so you could live the life you have today. The order to freeze the accounts was not an act of revenge, but simply the exercise of her legitimate authority, her right as the owner to protect her assets from the risks you were causing. The truth had come to light, but instead of relief, it only brought greater desolation and despair. Alex and his mother realized they had not only lost the fortune, they had lost everything. They had lost the trust of their late father and husband, and they had lost the right to walk with their heads held high. After the devastating truth was revealed, Alexander Thorne and his mother dared not cause any more scandal in the building's lobby. They returned home in silence, plunged into the deepest desolation and despair. The feeling of going from being the master and queen to realizing they were merely employees and parasites was more painful and humiliating than losing money. Upon returning to the cramped temporary accommodation they had secured, mother and son had a huge fight. Eleanor blamed her son for being a fool and not knowing how to control his wife, while Alex reproached his mother for her greed, which had brought things to this point. But after the mutual recriminations, they had to face the harsh reality. They were about to lose everything. If I, Sarah Miller, actually made a move, if I decided to withdraw all the group's capital, that $200 million empire would collapse in an instant, and they would go from a life of luxury to being empty-handed and even indebted. Fear overcame pride. They knew they could no longer face me legally. The only path left was to appeal to emotions. They decided to seek me out not to argue, but to plead. And to carry it out, they began to scheme another play, a more elaborate and false one. A few days later, I received a call from an unknown number. It was Alex. His voice on the other end of the line was no longer hostile or furious, but extremely weak and pitiable. "Sarah, it's me. Could we meet for a moment? It's just that Mom is very ill." I interrupted his words. I remained silent. I knew this was also an act, but I was curious to see what role they would play this time. "What's wrong?" I asked in a cold voice. "Since she found out about everything, Mom has fallen apart. She's not eating. She spends all day crying, calling out for you and Dad. The doctor says the psychological shock has been too great, and if she continues like this, it could be dangerous. Sarah, I know I was wrong. Mom was wrong too. But please, for the 10 years we spent together, could you come and see Mom one last time? I beg you. She says she has something to tell you before closing her eyes." The dramatic display of appealing to familial emotions was set up in a very tragic way. Although I knew it was a farce, I couldn't completely ignore it, and I wanted to see how far their shamelessness would go. I accepted. The meeting place was not a hospital, but the same luxury condo where we had lived together. They were probably trying to use the familiar space to evoke old memories. When I entered, the house's atmosphere was completely different. There was no longer any joy or elation, only a somber and pitiful atmosphere. My ex-mother-in-law, Eleanor, lay in the large bed in the master bedroom, looking extremely emaciated and pale. Her face, normally flushed and arrogant, was now pale and ashen. She kept her eyes closed, and her breathing was weak. Alex sat beside her, occasionally wiping her forehead with a handkerchief, a scene full of filial piety and sadness. Seeing me enter, Alex quickly stood up and motioned for me to be silent. "You came. Mom just fell asleep. Sit here and wait a moment." He made me sit in a nearby chair and began his monologue. He talked about his regret and guilt. He said he was wrong to listen to his mother and betray me. He said that only in the days he had been without me had he realized how valuable I was. "Sarah, I know it's too late to say anything, but truly, truly I regret it," he said with reddened eyes. "I don't expect you to forgive me. I just ask you to forgive my mother. She is old, and her judgment has been clouded. All she did was out of love for her son, out of the yearning for a grandchild. Please, for the 10 years we spent together, for the merit of my late father, save this family, save my father's life's work. Can you do that?" Just then, Eleanor, who was in bed, began to stir. She slowly opened her eyes and looked at me with cloudy eyes. "Sarah, Sarah, is that you, daughter?" she whispered. Her voice was as weak as a candle in the wind. She extended a bony, pale hand toward me. Come here to Mom." I hesitated, but finally approached and sat on the edge of the bed. She took my hand, which was cold as ice. Tears began to roll down her emaciated face. "Sarah, Mom is sorry, so sorry. Mom was wrong. I was a bad mother-in-law. I didn't treat you well. I was blind. I was greedy. Now I am paying for it. I will soon be reunited with your father-in-law. But before I go, I have one last wish, daughter." She struggled to sit up and looked at me with pleading eyes. "Daughter, save our Alex. Save the family business. It is your father-in-law's life's work. You can't let it sink. I will kneel if necessary. I will do whatever you want. I just ask you not to withdraw the funds, not to abandon the company. Okay, daughter?" A play performed to perfection. The tone, the look, every tear, everything was meticulously calculated. They no longer demanded or ordered. They used feelings, conjugal affection, and the merit of the deceased to bind me, to appeal to my compassion. They thought that I, a sentimental woman, could never be insensitive to this scene. But once again they underestimated me. I may be sentimental, but I am not stupid, and I knew very well that behind those tears hid an unalterable calculation. I sat next to my ex-mother-in-law's fake sickbed, still holding her hand. I listened to her pleas and laments, observing the tragic play that mother and son were trying to perfectly portray, one in the role of an elderly mother on the verge of death, belatedly repentant. The other, in the role of a devoted son plunged into deep grief. They used every possible means, feelings, conjugal affection, and even the merit of the deceased father to create an invisible cage of guilt, to lock me in it and make me yield out of weakness of heart. But they were wrong. 10 years spent amidst their hypocrisy had taught me one thing: never believe the tears of the selfish. I looked at her, saw her face emaciated and pale from days without eating or sleeping out of sheer panic. I saw the tears rolling down her cheeks, but I did not feel an ounce of compassion. I only found it ridiculous. I quietly withdrew my hand from hers. "Madam," I began. My voice remained calm, but cold and distant. "It's not necessary for you to continue acting. I have already grown tired of this play." My words were like a bucket of cold water on a performance at its peak. Eleanor froze. Her sobs stopped. Alex looked at me with wide eyes, unable to believe I could be so callous. "What are you saying?" Eleanor stammered. "Are you saying I'm acting when I'm dying?" "Whether you are dying or not, I don't know," I said as I walked toward the window. "But if I hadn't frozen the assets, you would probably be enjoying the search for a new home with your son and his mistress right now, wouldn't you?" I turned around and looked them directly in the eyes. "Do you think a few tears and a couple of apologies can erase the pain I have endured for 10 years? Do you think you can erase the betrayal and insults you inflicted upon me? Do you think I am still the silly Sarah from before, the one who softens with a few sweet words and is willing to sacrifice herself again?" I laughed, a dry, sarcastic laugh. "You are wrong. That Sarah is dead. She died the same day you, madam, applauded and celebrated when your son brought his mistress home. The person you have before you now is the president of the Thorn Group High Council. And I have not come here today to listen to your laments, but to talk business." The two words "talk business" coming from my mouth left mother and son stunned. They didn't understand what I meant. I didn't give them time to think. I walked over to the room's desk and pulled out a sheaf of documents I had prepared beforehand. I placed it in front of Eleanor on the nightstand. "This is my proposal." Alex rushed to the documents and read them. As he read, his face changed color. It was not a reconciliation agreement, but a proposal to restructure the entire power of the group. "According to this proposal," I said, with the cold, firm voice of a businesswoman, in the midst of negotiation, "I will not withdraw the group's funds. I will continue to invest, and could even inject more funds for business expansion. That will save the company from bankruptcy and save you from ruin." Hearing this, Eleanor and Alex's faces relaxed slightly, and a glimmer of hope appeared in their eyes. But I cut that hope short. "But," I emphasized, "in return, there are some conditions. First, you, madam, and Mr. Alexander Thorne will cede the rest of the shares currently in your names in the subsidiaries, a total of 20%. Added to the 80% I already manage, it means I will have 100% ownership of this group." "What?" Alex cried out. "That's simply stealing the company." "Stealing?" I raised an eyebrow. "I would say rather recovering. I am only recovering what was originally the fruit of my effort. But don't worry, I am not that ruthless." I continued with the second condition. "After I become president of the council, I will readjust Mr. Alexander Thorne's position. He will no longer be CEO. He will be demoted to a position more consistent with his actual abilities, deputy director of the sales team. He will continue to go to work and receive a salary like a normal employee." Of course, there will be no more luxury car, personal chauffeur, or unlimited expenses. He will have to learn to live off his salary. And you, madam, I turned to Eleanor. You can continue to live in this condo as the mother of a group employee. All living expenses and maid services will still be covered by me, but no more trips to Europe or luxury shopping. You will have to learn to live a normal life like any other retiree. And the last and most important condition. I looked at both of them. From now on, you will not interfere in the management of the group or my personal life at all. All decisions will be made by me alone. This is my proposal. It was a proposal that left them no choice. Accept and live a normal life, though not as opulent as before, or reject it and face the collapse of the group, the loss of their assets, and starting from scratch. I did not send them to jail or throw them onto the street, but I took away what they valued most, power and a royal life. It was a punishment more painful than losing money. Eleanor and Alex sat stunned. Their tragic play had completely failed. Only now did they realize that the person before them was not the daughter-in-law or wife they could easily manipulate with emotions, but a cold, decisive woman without the slightest tolerance, a true business shark, a president. After I presented my icy proposal, Alexander Thorne and his mother were left in a state of paralysis. They couldn't accept it, but they couldn't reject it either. They tried to plead again, appealing to old feelings, loyalty, and even Alex's deceased father, but I was no longer moved in the slightest. I gave them exactly 24 hours to think and sign the agreement. Otherwise, I would withdraw all the capital, just as I had promised. Amidst this tense situation, another character who had been momentarily forgotten suddenly appeared to complicate things further. It was Chloe Hayes, Alex's pregnant mistress. When Alex's accounts were frozen and he couldn't buy the condo, Chloe began to feel uneasy, but she hadn't completely given up yet. She believed that as long as she carried the child, the treasure that could continue the lineage in her womb, she still held the upper hand. She thought that no matter how difficult the situation was, the Thorne family wouldn't dare mistreat their firstborn. She stayed in the luxurious apartment Alex had secured for her, waiting for good news from her lover. But when Alex arrived with a distorted face and told her about my proposal, that he would be demoted and that the entire family could no longer live with the opulence as before, Chloe couldn't stand idly by. Her dream of becoming a magnate's wife was about to shatter, and she decided to take matters into her own hands. She didn't come looking for me. She probably knew that confronting me directly at that moment was useless. She chose an easier target to attack, her future mother-in-law, Eleanor. That day, while Eleanor was still in bed, distressed by my decision, Chloe appeared uninvited. She no longer had the sweet and fawning look from before. She walked straight into the room and sat down in a chair opposite Eleanor with a very defiant attitude. "Madam," she got straight to the point. "I heard a rumor that the sister Sarah is back and wants to keep the entire family fortune. Is that true?" Eleanor sighed and nodded wearily. "Yes, that girl holds everything in her hands. Now my son and I can only wait for her mercy." "Mercy?" Chloe sneered. "Do you think a woman who has been betrayed by her husband and expelled by her mother-in-law will have mercy? You are too naive. She will not leave you or your son alone. She will torture you slowly, making you live a life worse than death for revenge." Chloe's words were like needles piercing Eleanor's fears. Then, "What do we do now?" she asked in a panicked voice. "What do we do?" Chloe smiled calculatedly. "You have forgotten that you still have an ace up your sleeve, and that ace is here in my belly." She gently caressed her bulging abdomen. "The firstborn of the Thorne family. Sarah has money and power, but she cannot have this. With this in our hands, we can still turn the tables." "What? What do you mean?" Eleanor still didn't understand. "I mean," Chloe leaned closer and whispered, "that we cannot let the sister Sarah take everything. Alex may be demoted, but we cannot allow a stranger to keep the entire group's fortune. You must fight. Demand that if she wants to keep the company, she must allocate a considerable part of the fortune to secure the future of your grandson. I don't need much, just a condo, a car, and a sufficient monthly allowance to raise a child like a prodigy. It is the child's legitimate right." She was inciting her mother-in-law to confront me to demand a division of the fortune. A farce of mother-in-law and daughter-in-law united against the ex-wife was truly ridiculous. Initially, Eleanor hesitated slightly. She was too frightened by my coldness and determination, but the thought of having to live a normal life without being able to show off or enjoy, and especially thinking about her grandson, greed resurfaced in her heart. And so began an internal struggle between two women, one the ex-daughter-in-law and the other the new one. Chloe kept coming to the house to cry and complain to Eleanor, painting a miserable future in which her grandson would suffer and not have what he deserved. She even insinuated that she was unsure if she could keep the child, if the family did not guarantee an opulent life for her and her son, a blatant threat. Blinded by Chloe's incitement and threats, Eleanor began pressuring Alex again. She cried, saying she couldn't allow her grandson to lose out. She demanded that Alex be firmer with me, that he claim the rights of his own blood. Caught in the middle, Alex was in an impossible situation. On one side, there was his powerful ex-wife, who controlled his economic life. On the other, his pregnant mistress and his greedy mother, who wouldn't stop pressuring him. He was distraught, unsure what to do. The house where he had once been king had now become a battlefield of endless arguments and intrigues. I learned about everything through my loyal housekeepers, but I merely observed in silence. I wanted to see how far they would go in the chaos they themselves had created. And I wanted to see what choice the culprit of everything, my ex-husband, would make. Cornered, on one side, by my pressure and the threat of losing everything, and on the other, by the blackmail and endless demands of his mistress, Chloe, Alexander Thorne completely collapsed. He no longer had the spirit to work. He spent his days immersed in alcohol and endless arguments. Eleanor, pressured by me and in turn by her future daughter-in-law, entered a state of genuine frenzy. Greed, wounded vanity, and the fear of losing everything turned her into a cornered beast, willing to commit the craziest of follies to turn the situation around. After several days of deliberation, she decided to play her last card, the one she considered the most cunning and wicked. She would no longer confront me head-on with law or logic. She would use a much more fearsome weapon, public opinion. She wanted to turn me from a betrayed victim into an ungrateful daughter-in-law and cruel wife who had used tricks to seize her in-laws' fortune. She wanted to use social pressure and gossip to stain my reputation so I couldn't raise my head again. Her plan was executed very methodically. She contacted several journalists specializing in gossip and lifestyle press, writers willing to sell their pens for money. She invented an extremely tragic and moving story. In that story, she was the poor mother-in-law who had dedicated her life to her son and future grandson. Her son, Alexander Thorne, was a management genius who had built a huge business all by himself. And I, Sarah Miller, was a lucky small-town girl, rescued by her son's love. For the past 10 years, I had done nothing but live like a queen and enjoy myself, but when her husband succeeded, I became consumed by jealousy and didn't want him to have a child with another woman. And when I discovered that my late father-in-law, trusting me, had left me part of the company control, I changed immediately. I used conspiracies and tricks to seize the entire fortune. I threw my husband and mother-in-law out of their own house and even turned my back on the grandchild to be born. A perfectly constructed story that played on mass psychology, envy toward the rich, compassion for the elderly and children, and prejudice against ambitious and cunning women. A few days later, numerous articles and fake news sites published the story in unison with very sensational headlines. The heartbreaking story of family fortune usurpation by a magnate's wife. The tragedy of a young man stripped of everything by his housewife wife after 10 years together. A grandmother's tearful plea. I hope my daughter-in-law returns the fortune for my grandson's sake. The articles immediately unleashed a storm on social media. My photos, those of Alex, Eleanor, and Chloe, spread uncontrollably. Thousands, tens of thousands of malicious comments and insults were directed at me. They called me a viper, ungrateful, heartless woman. They didn't try to find out the truth. They only believed the tragic story Eleanor had painted. My reputation and honor, built over a lifetime, were being trampled and destroyed by them in a matter of days. Eleanor was very satisfied with her move. She thought that I, a woman who valued my honor, couldn't withstand this pressure. She thought that fear would make me seek her out to negotiate and accept her conditions, but she was wrong once again. She didn't understand that when a shark decides to go out to sea, it doesn't fear small waves. The public opinion attack against me was just a nuisance. It couldn't bring me down. I knew that the best way to deal with rumors is not to confront and deny them, but to crush them with a bigger and more powerful truth, and I decided to show that truth to them and to this entire society. In the face of the media storm orchestrated by Alexander Thorne and his mother, I did not react for 3 days. I merely observed in silence. My silence emboldened them even more and aroused public curiosity. They thought fear had left me speechless. They didn't know that my silence was preparation for the final counterattack, preparation for a decisive blow that would end everything. On the 4th day, when the story of the ungrateful daughter-in-law was at its peak of interest, my company, the Thorne Group, issued a surprise press release. It announced an official press conference for the following morning on the topic, Presentation of the New President of the High Council and Clarification of Internal Group Rumors. The announcement immediately caused a huge impact. New president? Wasn't Alexander Thorne the CEO and top executive? Who would the new president be? And what were those rumors? All media and public attention focused on this press conference. The next morning, the group's large auditorium was packed with journalists from all major media outlets. Alexander Thorne and his mother also attended. They were seated in the front row, reserved for the family, with an expression of curiosity mixed with a little anxiety. They didn't understand what plot I was hatching. At 9 o'clock, the press conference began. The first to take the stage was not me, but the lawyer of the late President Thorne. My father-in-law's lawyer was a respected veteran in the legal world. He solemnly announced President Thorne's will and the asset fiduciary trust contract, revealing the entire truth about the group's actual ownership and control to all the press. A murmur of astonishment ran through the entire auditorium, and when everyone was in shock at that truth, I appeared. I was no longer the housewife-looking Sarah Miller. I wore a specially designed white power suit that radiated authority and elegance. My hair was pulled up in a high bun, showcasing an intelligent forehead, and my face was lightly but incisively made up. I walked confidently, exuding the bearing of a true president. I stood at the podium, scanned the entire auditorium, and my gaze stopped on Alex and his mother, who sat with pale faces, drained of blood. "Ladies and gentlemen," I began. My voice resonated clear and firm through the sound system. "I am Sarah Miller, and as of today, I am the new president of the Thorne Group High Council." After the brief presentation, I did not stop to discuss the rumors. I simply projected all the irrefutable evidence onto the large screen behind me. First, a video from the security cameras showing how Alex brought his pregnant mistress home and how the whole family applauded and celebrated. Then, audio recordings that vividly recorded how my mother-in-law insulted me and kicked me out of the house. And finally, copies of bank statements and receipts showing how I had had to maintain their standard of living for the past 10 years. The entire truth was exposed in the crudest and most undeniable way. The entire auditorium fell into a profound silence. Only the continuous sound of camera flashes could be heard. Alex and Eleanor sat with their heads bowed, unable to look at anyone. They had completely lost their honor before the entire world. After presenting sufficient evidence, I ended my speech with a final statement. As for the future of the Thorne Group, I commit to continue leading the company and taking it to a new level. Regarding Mr. Alexander Thorne, given the events, he is no longer fit to hold the position of CEO. The council will soon make an official decision on his new role. As for personal matters, I will make no further comment. I will let everything be resolved through legal channels. The press conference ended. I had achieved total victory. All the rumors were shattered, my honor was restored, and true power finally returned to its owner. In the following days, Alexander Thorne and his mother completely disappeared from high society. They had to move out of the condo and live a normal life. Alex was demoted to a rank-and-file employee position in an unimportant department. He had to go to work by himself and earn a living. Chloe, seeing that her lover had lost everything, quickly aborted the pregnancy, and fled far away, and I officially took the reins of the group. With my talent and determination, I restructured the entire company, making it grow much stronger than before. I was no longer a shadow, but a true president, respected and admired by all. Sometimes, when I have free time, I still stand alone in my office on the top floor of the building, contemplating the bright city lights. I no longer feel lonely. I have found peace in my independence and my strength. My story is perhaps not a love story, but the story of a woman's awakening, of her recovery, a story that confirms that the greatest happiness does not come from a man, but from one's own worth and capability. Greetings to everyone who has followed the final moments of Miss Sarah Miller's life story on the Golden Life Consulting channel. As the final account concludes, there remains in our hearts not only satisfaction for the triumph of justice, but also a reflection on honor and the dark corners of the human soul. Miss Sarah's story is not simply common revenge, dear viewers. If we look deeper, it is a firm declaration about a woman's capability and worth. It is a profound lesson about the dangers of living in delusion and proof that intelligence is the most powerful and attractive weapon. The first and most fundamental lesson of this story is a warning about the role and sacrifice of women in the home. Our protagonist, Miss Sarah, is the epitome of a talented woman with the mind of a financial genius, but out of love, she agreed to step into the background, to become a shadow, a housewife, so her husband could shine. Her sacrifice was immense. She dedicated all her youth and intelligence to building an empire for her in-laws. But what did she get in return for that silent sacrifice? It was not respect. Instead, it fed an incompetent man living in delusion and a family that only knew how to enjoy the efforts of others. Miss Sarah's tragedy is a costly lesson for all women. Never give up your career and your own value for any man. You can be a solid support, but never an invisible shadow. Because if you yourselves renounce your own light, do not complain if others fail to see you. From there, we reach an even more important lesson: the danger of depending on others and living in the illusion of one's own abilities. Alexander Thorne is the embodiment of that failure. He had everything: status, money, fame, but none of it he achieved himself. He was nothing more than a perfectly manufactured puppet, a scarecrow, but he believed he was a real king. That delusion turned him into an arrogant and treacherous being who despised the very person who had created him. And when the puppeteer decided to cut the strings, he plummeted from the top to the abyss. This story is a warning for all of us, especially men. Never build your career on a foundation of lies or by depending on others. True success must come from one's own capability, from sweat and effort, because everything that is gained too easily is lost too quickly. And perhaps what makes this story so special and inspiring is Miss Sarah's spectacular comeback. She did not use tears. She did not resort to cheap jealousy tricks. She used her most powerful weapon, her intelligence and her financial power. She proved that when a woman holds knowledge and independence in her hands, no force can belittle or trample her. Her revenge was not to destroy, but to restore order, to return everything to its true value. She did not ruthlessly throw them onto the street. She simply took away what did not belong to them and forced them to face their true nature and capability. Dear viewers, Miss Sarah's story is a powerful affirmation that in modern society, a woman's value is no longer limited to being a good wife and mother in the kitchen. Intelligence, bravery, and financial independence are the most precious jewels and the strongest armor. Constantly learn, improve yourselves, and bravely seize opportunities to affirm your own worth. If this story has provided you with a new perspective, profound lessons about life, and motivated you to become a better version of yourselves, do not hesitate to subscribe to the channel, like, and share this video. Thank you very much for your attention.